Hi, this is Karen with Karen's Cards and More, and today we're going to work on a Christmas card. Christmas will be here right around the corner, and I wanted to show you how to make a really cool card using something that you probably already have in your kitchen. So let's take a look at the card. This is the card that we're going to do today, and I did not use our silver. I'm an independent demonstrator for Stampin' Up, but this is not the silver metallic cardstock. This is another medium that we're going to use today, and let me show you what that is. I'm just using heavy duty tin foil, and we're going to emboss it, and we're going to make this beautiful card just using the tin foil for our main focal point. The sky's the limit with this. You can emboss not just Christmas cards. You could look at your embossing folders and themes that you might be able to come up with. Great medium, but I'm going to show you a few tips and tricks for working with this. It can be sensitive, it can rip easy, and just a few things to make it a little bit easier. So let's talk about what we need to make this card. And I'm going to be using a couple of different stamp sets. I'm using the Snowflake Wishes for the inside of the card. Let me show you that. To stamp a few snowflakes on the inside. But for the outside of the card, I wanted this Happy Holidays, and the Snowflake Wishes didn't have that, so I pulled out my poinsettia petals, and there's a Happy Holidays in there that I wanted to use. So those are the two stamp sets that I'm using. Then I'm also using the Snowflake embossing folder, so we're going to be using that. And then for the cardstock, I started with a basic white card base, which is the traditional size, 8.5 by 5.5, scored in the middle at 4 1/4. Then I have a piece of Night of Navy that is 5 1/4 by 4. Then I have a small strip of Night of Navy that's about 1/8 of an inch. I just cut a small strip. It doesn't matter the size. It's just going to give us this part between, we're going to do some partial embossing, so I just put that strip on there. Then you just need a scrap of Night of Navy to do your sentiment tag. And then I have a piece, now I'm using the gray. The color of this does not matter. You want it to be 3 3/4 by 5, but it doesn't matter what this looks like. This could be a piece of cardstock that you stamped on and you didn't like what you did and you just kept it in case you could ever use it. This would be a great application for that because it does not matter what this looks like. You're going to cover it up. So let's get started. Let's start with this piece and getting it covered. And I'm going to bring in a different background because the gray on the gray you might not be able to see. One other thing I'm using today, the Stitch So Sweetly die set, I'm using the smallest piece from this, the smallest rectangle. I'm going to be using that. That's how I'm going to create the sentiment tag. So just wanted to let you know that. So we're going to start with this, and I'm going to bring in my tin foil. You could cut your tin foil and emboss it, and I'm going to show you a few examples of what I'm talking about. So on this card, this is one I made earlier, just playing around, and on this one I embossed the whole piece of tin foil that I was going to use, and I used Stampin' Seal to adhere it with no cardstock backing to it. And you can see that the end, it's hard to get the Stampin' Seal or the glue all the way to the end, and it lifts real easy, and it's real temperamental, and it's just real fragile. It's real easy to crinkle when you do it this way. The next thing I tried, I said, okay, well that didn't work too good. So the next thing I'm going to try, and this is the sample that I started with this morning, I'm going to try this where I do put it on a cardstock base. And that's what I did with this, where I just used the Stampin' Seal, and I had the foil was the same size as the cardstock. I used my Stampin' Seal and glued it down. Well, it looks okay. except the edges are still real fragile. You can see that it lifts up easy, it folds and crinkles easy. So I still didn't like that. So I played around a little more and I came up with the technique that I'm going to show you this morning, and that's how I'm going to make the card. Okay, so we're just going to need to get a piece of foil that's a little bit bigger than our cardstock. And you want to try to keep it as flat as possible. The fewer wrinkles that it has, definitely the better. So I'm trying to be gentle as I tear this, just from the standpoint I don't want wrinkles. And then I'm going to try to smooth it out. I'll take this out from under it so I can get rid of the wrinkles. I want to smooth it as much as possible. And then I want to pick the part that's the smoothest to use for my card. And I'm going to bring my cardstock base in to see about where I can tear it at. I think like that's going to work really well. So I need to tear it somewhere over in here. And this doesn't need to be a great tear because we're going to fix it. Just needs to get some of the excess off. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put this about where I want it. And then I'm going to tear off the excess. It makes it easier to work with if you get rid of as much excess as possible. Okay. And I probably have a little more that I can take off over here, so I'm going to do that. And it does tear pretty straight. Okay. Now, all I'm going to do before I emboss it, and you can choose, you need to think about if you want the shiny side to be up on your card. I want it to be down. I want the non-shiny side to be the front of my card. You could definitely do it either way. With the snowflakes, it would absolutely be beautiful either way. So I am just going to, on the back side, I am just going to fold my foil over the cardstock edge, just like this. And I'm going to go around all four corners. And this is going to give you a much better solid base for your foil. And it's going to keep those ends from the edges from being so fragile. So I'm just going to continue with this. I'm just going along the edge of the cardstock to create a nice smooth edge for our foil. One more side to do. Kind of just like practicing your Christmas wrapping a little bit. Now, you can come in with your scissors, and if you don't like the way these corners are a little bit bulky, I'm just going to trim this corner a little bit. And it will not hurt your scissors. In fact, it may sharpen them a little bit. I'm going to cut this off. Okay. Just to get rid of a little of the bulk on the corners. The other two corners, this one's got a little bit of bulk, so I'm just going to trim this one back just a little. Just the same way as we miter corners when we're making 3D projects, kind of the same thing, just getting rid of some of the bulk. So now I have a solid surface on the front, and my edges are nice and smooth, and they're not gonna lift. That's the easiest way I have found to prepare your foil for the embossing step. We're gonna emboss in a few minutes, but before we do that, I wanna go ahead and because I'm gonna use the cuttle bug to do the embossing and to cut out my sentiment layer, I want to go ahead and get this ready so we can do both at once. So we're going to do a little heat embossing. So I'm just going to bring in my embossing buddy, and I'm going to go over this is Night of Navy. This is my scrap. And this is where I'm using the Happy Holidays. So I'm going to bring in my Versamark. And I'm just going to ink this up. Normally, when I'm doing a video, I will go ahead and have the piece cut, and then on camera, it'll already be die cut, and all we'll have to do is do the stamping and the embossing. But because this tag is so small, it's really hard to hold on to put the embossing powder on and to do the heat embossing. So that's why I'm going to go ahead and do this part first, and then we'll die cut. So I'm not going to be real picky about this because I can straighten it when I die cut it. So I'm just going to stamp that Versamark on there, just like that. Done with the Versamark. And then I'm going to just bring in a scrap piece of cardstock underneath this. And I'm going to bring in my silver embossing powder. And I'm just going to sprinkle that over that. And I usually go over it a couple times just to make sure that it's nice and solid. I'll get rid of the excess so we can have it to use for later. I'm just going to bring in my rag and wipe some of this off. Okay, now I'm ready to bring in my embossing gun. And this won't take long at all. It's just a little bit that we're going to be heat embossing. And just emboss it till it gets shiny. You'll see it change color when the powder is melted. Okay, just like that. Then I'm going to bring in my Cuttlebug. The Stampin' Emboss Mini would be great for this technique, depending on the size of the folder that you're using. Some of them will fit in the mini, some won't, but then we have the regular size that would also be great for this. So I am going to bring in my plates that I need, and depending on what machine you're using, the plates may be different to get the best embossed image. That's where you'll just have to play with your machine and know. So I'm going to bring in my snowflake embossing folder, and I want to leave the bottom portion sticking out of the folder so it doesn't emboss. And I didn't measure this. I'm not being real technical with it. I knew that I wanted that little strip at the bottom. So I'm just leaving maybe an inch and a half. This may be different from the card that I showed you at the beginning because I just didn't measure it. I just eyeballed it. All I was worried about was getting it straight in the folder so that this part is the same width here as it is there. But I really didn't worry too much about the size of that. So I'm going to put that down. I'm going to bring in my top plate. And my machine works best if I put a couple pieces of cardstock on top of that. So I'm just going to run this through, get my cardstock straightened up. Okay, just going to run this through to get my image. And then while I have this over here, I'm going to go ahead and die cut our sentiment tag. So we just need our Night of Navy piece, and I'm going to use this little stitched rectangle. And I'm going to bring in a piece of, just a small piece of purple tape so that I can hold this in place so that I don't, it doesn't move while I'm trying to cut it out. I'll just need a small piece, so let me get that. And I'm just going to straighten this where I want it. And I'm going to tape that down. I have a magnetic plate under there, but sometimes it still will shift, especially with little pieces like that. So I'm going to run this through. Get rid of that. I'm able to get rid of this. If that sticks on your plate, just take your pick tool and that'll lift it up for you. So I'm done with my plates. And here's my embossed tin foil. Isn't that beautiful? Just makes a beautiful piece for the front of your card using tin foil. Isn't that awesome? So bring that in so you can see it a little bit better. So now we have all of our component pieces. And the only thing left to do is do a little bit of stamping on the inside. So I'm going to need my foam piece. And I have my card base here. And I'm just going to use Night of Navy ink. And I'm using this image that has the multiple size snowflakes and the little dots of snow. And I'm just inking this up. And I'm just going to stamp it once in the lower left corner. And I'm going to ink up again. And then I'm going to stamp in the upper right. Just like that. And then that leaves room in between to do our message that we want to do. And still gives us a little bit of decoration on the inside. Okay, so then I'm going to flip this over and we're ready to start putting this together. I'm going to be using the Stampin' Seal. If I can find where I've hid it from myself. Here it is, right beside me. So let's start putting this together. So I'm going to adhere the foil embossed piece to the Night of Navy mat that we had cut out. So I'm just going to use my Stampin' Seal for that. Just put some of this on the back. And it will be a little bit temperamental with the foil, and I just kind of do some cross pieces like that will hold it down, but you don't want to just put the Stampin' Seal on the foil because it will rip it and it will tear, but you want to make sure that the foil is adhered. So that's the best way that I found to do it, is not just go along the edge, but actually go do some angling. Okay. So I'm going to put this piece on here. Just trying to get it in the middle, and I'm just going to press that down. And then I am just going to, for this piece, and I'm going to bring in my silicone mat just because I'm working with glue. And I'm using our fine tip glue pen for this just because it's such a small strip. And I'm just going to run glue on this strip. Just like that. I'm going to bring this over here. And I'm just going to, see which end I've got my glue on. And I'm just going to cover that seam that the embossing folder made, where we did the partial embossing. And I'm just going to use this as a break in between the two. Then I'm going to come in with my scissors and I'm just going to trim that just like that. So now we have a little bit of color to make our break there. So then I'm going to use Stampin' Dimensionals. Let's put this on the card front and then we'll add our sentiment layer that we have embossed and ready to go. So I'm just going to flip this over and I'm going to come in with my Stampin' Seal. I'm just going along the four corners, and this is just regular cardstock that has the tin foil on the front, so you would just adhere this like normal. Now this is my inside, so I know that this has to be my card front. So I'm just going to look to try to get this even, just like that. I'm going to press that down. Now with the foil, you want to press directly down. If you try swiping, you could rip it if you swipe too hard. So I'm just pressing down instead of swiping my hand over it, just like that. And then I'm going to turn this like this. And I'm going to bring in some dimensionals to put on the back of my sentiment layer. Just like that. I'm just going to use 2 for this and take my paper backing off. And we're going to just center this up on the front. I'm going to come in with my bone folder and give it a crease along the back. And there we have it. Pretty quick and easy Christmas card, but a little bit of different spin since we used the tin foil. I hope you'll give it a try, play around with your tin foil. Sometimes it's fun to go into the kitchen and look for other things that we can use in our crafting besides our traditional crafting supplies. So I hope you'll give this a try, and I will craft with you again soon. If you have not joined my Facebook group or followed or liked my Facebook page, that's Karen Smith, or Karen's Cards and More. You can do that. You can check out my website, karensmith.stampinup.net. You can order any of the supplies except the foil that you've seen me use here today. And I will be back to craft with you again soon.